Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Lizzie and Justin from Thirdspace, and we are here for a special edition of our Turning Towards Life project. So normally at this point we say it's 9 a.m. on a Sunday and we're live on Facebook, but we're not live. We're recording this to take account of the imminent arrival of Lizzie, of your baby, anytime now. And we wanted to make sure that we can keep the Turning Towards Life project going. So we are in the midst of getting a few pre-recorded conversations done, and this is one of them. So whenever this goes out, welcome. Thank you for joining us, whether you're on YouTube, or we will post this on our Facebook group or on our podcast. We're so glad that you're with us. You can always find us at turningtowards.life if you want to find the source that we're reading and find the hundreds of other conversations that are now part of this project. And Lizzie, I'm really glad we're getting to do this.
Me too. Who knows where we're going to be when this broadcast happens, but thank you everybody for your welcoming of this slightly off practice thing for a very special thing that's happening in the world. Me, Marvy, and everybody who's involved in my life as well. So this source is something I found in a poetry day, a retreat day I was recently in, along with Justin, where we all read poetry and reflect and read poetry aloud to one another as well. And this really, really moved me. And it moved me because it hurt me, I think, to read it and to feel what kind of thing happens in the world between human beings, which I think is quite common because of our own misunderstandings of how to love, really. And this poem, so Justin and I have just been Googling how to pronounce this name properly, to give due respect to this incredible poet. And we think we are saying that it's a poem called How to Kill a Living Thing by Eileen Nick Orcha. And it's an Irish name, as you can read in the source, that doesn't read like that in the way that we understand how to use letters. So we've seen if we can find it, and hopefully, Eileen, we're doing your name justice, and if anybody has a better way of saying it, maybe you could help us figure that out. And so I'm going to read, and we'll see where this takes us. And thank you, Eileen, for this incredible, painful poem. How to kill a living thing. Neglect it, criticize it to its face. Say how it kills the light, traps all the rubbish, bores you with its green. Continually harden your heart, then cut it down close to the root as possible. Forget it for a week or a month. Return with an axe. Split it with one blow. Insert a stone to keep the wound wide open.
So I'm going to read it too. And Lizzie, I thought to say before I read it that one way to listen to this is to listen from the place that we all have that does this to ourselves, and to listen also from the place that we all have this does this to others, particularly when we're afraid, and to listen from the place in you that's outside all of that. That part of us that knows how to have living things live. We can listen from there at the same time as we hear this. How to kill a living thing. Neglect it. Criticize it to its face. Say how it kills the light, traps all the rubbish, bores you with its green. Continually harden your heart, then cut it down close to the root as possible. forget it for a week or a month, return with an axe, split it with one blow, insert a stone to keep the wound wide open.
Thank you for just inviting us to listen from those different places. I think the one that resonates with me today is where I do this to myself, that place of self-killing in the context of here. And it also moves me to feel where other people in my life have this being done to them, as it were. And how hard I find that to be with and to tolerate and to find compassion for when it happens. And sometimes this can happen over a lifetime. You know, it's not just an event. This is like a systematic thing that we can do as human beings when, as you say, we feel afraid. But sometimes it's so hard to find the compassion when you can see someone that you care about being hurt like this. And that connects me to the way that it hurts when I'm like this with myself. You know, cutting myself down, criticizing myself, doing something to keep the wound open, you know, to keep coming back to the, keep twisting the knife, as it were. And I wondered about this poem as a way to shine light on that so that I could have a deeper awareness of when I'm doing it, when others are doing it. And to shine a light on it means to at least be aware of our compulsion to do this, and maybe to have a different avenue to follow than this. When something arises that scares us or we don't like about ourselves, or we've caused some kind of upset, or we feel like it's our fault, or we did something wrong, we're feeling guilty. Feels like it's an invitation to be aware and to really know how to relate to ourselves in a different way than this, by saying what this is.
They're such painful words, Lizzie, for me. I think for maybe some similar reasons to the things that you say, partly because I can see how many times I've done this to myself. And I suppose it's true to say, but of course still do sometimes in some ways. But also because I see how I've done it to others. And also because it's increasingly intolerable to see it done to others. So this is a pain-ridden poem, and I'm very grateful for it. Exactly as you say, because it shows us something that goes, it shows us something that happens that we could orient differently to. And the line that I'm most grateful for in this poem right now is actually bang in the middle. It's actually two lines: continually harden your heart. Because what I came to see as you were reading this is that when, let's see if I can, this feels like it takes a bit of grasping to see if I can say it, but when we do this to another, when we do this to ourselves, aside from all the things that we're doing that are so painful and wounding to the one to whom we're doing it, whether that's one is us or the other person, by saying all these things and being so committed to keeping the wound wide open, what we're inevitably doing in order to do this is hardening our own hearts. There's no way of doing this without it being part of a process of sort of making like a layer of hard protection around our hearts. And I think that that goes both ways. So first of all, in order to practice such unkindness, most of us have to harden our hearts, because if we really felt the consequences of what we were doing and what we were saying, if we felt the other side of it, it would be too much and we probably wouldn't do it. Even if we feel like we're doing this for good reason. I think actually very often when we think, I'm cutting you down close to your roots, Lizzie, and because it's for your own good that I do this, we have to harden ourselves to do that. And what that means is that this is never a neutral event for the one who does the killing of the living thing, even if it seems like it is, even if we justify it by saying it comes from love, which I think is often how we get ourselves into this. I'm afraid of your freedom. I'm afraid of your way of expressing. I'm afraid of so I'm going to cut it off at the roots, and we cut ourselves off at the roots. And I'm feeling really mindful of this. We're recording this a few days after it's been Yom Kippur, which is the Jewish Day of Atonement, which for me anyway has involved many, many hours being in community, in reading liturgy together, which is a constant reminder of the cost of hardening our hearts, that most of what we do that destroys in the world is because we hardened ourselves first. So that's why I suppose that's in my mind. And it reminds me that the way to undo this, that the place that it starts is by allowing ourselves, our own hearts, to feel the tenderness and the pain and the fear that we're trying so hard not to feel by lashing out in all directions, our way and other people's way. And that maybe at root, that's why we do this at all, is that the cause of our witting and unwitting cruelty is that we're frightened of letting ourselves feel the vulnerability and uncertainty of being a human. And sometimes it's our best but very misguided attempt to keep the world safe and predictable is by cutting everything off, everything and everybody and ourselves off at the roots again and again and again, causing great destruction. But at least if we destroy and we make sure that things don't live too much, we won't have to face the consequences and perils of living, which is how much is unknown and how much we'll get to feel and how small I can feel in the midst of it.
It just strikes me as well, Justin, how important the title of this thing is. Because if you change the title to how to teach someone you love everything they need to know to keep them safe, it would be a different orientation completely. The fact that she's called it How to Kill a Living Thing, it's a massive call to the thing that you're saying. It's like, well, when you do these things, this is what actually you're doing. And I feel very called into that, like, criticizing something, tell something that it bores you. I can feel that there's a part of us as human beings that thinks that is good for people, good for ourselves. If I just criticize myself enough, I'll get better. If I'm harsh with myself, I'll improve. And this is a methodology employed by lots of people in the world to make people better at things. At sport, maybe, or music, or places where, or education. There are ways that this is a really practiced thing. And I feel like orienting itself with the title that it has is a wake-up call. It feels like a kind of, oh God, like I need to wake up to this. And some people, this might be a way of being in the world. To do all of this stuff might just be how our good intentions are manifesting. And, you know, conscious saying people and not me as well. And I do know the place in me that does this. But I also know it's hard for me to do these things repetitively and consistently as well. Like, I'm just trying to be honest about that. And I wouldn't um, I wouldn't call myself a practicer of this stuff on other people. Um, but it's not to say that I don't see it happening with people with very, very good intentions who I know love one another, and it's really it does exist. So yeah, I just feel like it's important to keep it front of mind, because if I see it in the world, if I feel it in the world, it also has to be a part of me.
Mm.
And that if I can, you know, I love the fact that you picked out the hardening of your heart part, because I think there's a way we can be with this in other people too, which is, as we soften, we can have conversations that have other people soften. It means that maybe this doesn't manifest itself so much if we can be people who get into conversation about things that mean something and how we really feel and how it really feels maybe to be on the end of this, and get really clear with ourselves of what it feels to be criticized and what it feels to be cut down to the root, and what it feels like when someone keeps the wound open, and to, instead of believing it, instead of going, oh well, I must be that person that deserves this, but we can also have a conversation about what it's like to be on the end of it, so that it might be different. And again, creating an awareness of it, so that we could say something back, that we could find an opening in here, rather than just being in the same dance as we've always been in with someone.
That's the part that's really coming to me as you're speaking, Lizzie, is not, you know, as you've been talking, I've been thinking about something I saw just in the last few days, which was so painful, which is to see someone I really love, who's a parent, doing this to their child, who I also really love. Exactly this. And finding how much fear and tightness and rage came up in me at the whole situation. And I feel so tender towards the young person who was on the receiving end of this. And when there's a sort of big power differential in our relationships, of course, this is where this is so painful and poisonous if we don't have any root to, in that relationship, to speak back our aliveness and our goodness into it, which I think is very often the parent-child kind of relationship. And then I got myself wondering, as you were talking about, well, there's a way that if I want to have a conversation with the person who I love, who's a parent, about this, or if that gets directed to me by someone who is an equal, who's a peer, can I find my way in the face of being cut down or split with an axe by another person? Can I find a way in me not to harden my own heart and to simply do the thing that I know is very, very easy to do, which is say, well, I'll just get my wounding back in then. You know, my way of showing you that this is painful, and because I care about you, because you matter to me, I'm really going to show you how hurt I am by neglecting you or criticizing you to your face, or harden, you know, all of those things. And that this move, this is what I was seeing from what you were saying, that this move, which I think is really fear. This whole poem is about fear. It's about what we do when we're afraid of being vulnerable with one another and of being open to one another. Can I be courageous enough and loving enough to soften my heart, and instead of keeping the violence going, to essentially to practice non-violence in this situation? Can I tell the truth about myself, but can I also speak from the part of myself that is goodness into the part of them that is goodness, without having to perpetuate our contact with this destructive side of ourselves. And I think it's, for many of us, this is really hard. It takes an enormous amount of practice of returning to ourselves, and willingness to stay in the feeling of being at risk in order to make contact with the alive part of ourselves that knows a bigger way of dealing with our fear than cutting everything off at the root so it won't be alive anymore. I'm glad to say I think I've been learning this. I've been learning not to run, and I've been learning not to freeze, and I've been learning not to fight, and I've been learning more to do the other thing, which I suppose is to be true and soft-hearted, which doesn't mean flimsy. That's one of the invitations I'm taking from this poem, is to feel the harshness of the words, and in every word to imagine what the other way is.
Yeah, I feel like I've been learning it too, and I think one of the ways that I relate into this is that I think I'm learning to say how I feel. So when I'm criticized, there are times when I criticize back. I know that that's a defense move that I have, or kind of say, well, they're idiots, or something, like to belittle them in my mind if they criticize me or something. But if it's something in close, I'm learning to say, when you say that, this is how I feel. And to identify the feeling underneath the want to criticize back or the want to defend, but to name what's underneath for myself and then try and communicate that. It creates a very different, it's like you go from this to kind of something different, like something where you get underneath the skin of something. That's how I'm experiencing it. Of if this comes, but as you say, it depends on the power differential as well. So when this comes from somebody who has positional power in some way, or they have some decision-making ability over me that affects my life or something, it's a very different skill muscle that I feel like I need to call on, that has me meet that rather than stay silent or think they must be right or just criticize them over again in my mind, but never actually say anything or do anything about it. I think the power conversation is really important in the context of this, because depending on that differential, it really calls on very different parts of us. And I think also entering into the realm of parenthood and knowing the power that we hold as parents and as an auntie, and anybody with younger people around me, it's like to know the power that I hold and acknowledge that is a really important thing. And I can do that better when I've been in the situation where there's power over me and I've observed that and felt how that feels. So there's a lesson in being overpowered in order for me to be conscious about the power that I hold with the people younger than me or less powerful than me. And I feel like this is a really important topic in the conversation about holding power positionally, relationally, age-wise, height-wise, whatever the differential is, strength-wise, and to know how powerful it is to be powerful, to be in a position of power, how powerful it is in terms of the impact that we have on other people. I feel like it's a very big call to recognize power, the power that we hold.
It's making me think, Lizzie, what you're saying, that maybe the big move that we can make, particularly if we're a parent or someone with power of a others in a work or in anywhere in our culture, but I'm particularly thinking about parenthood and organizational authority, those kind of power structures. That when we find ourselves wanting to do this, a couple of things we could ask ourselves is, first of all, is from where in me am I doing this? Am I doing this from the part of me that's afraid, or am I really doing this from the part of me that takes care of people? And then the second thing we could ask is it true that in order to support this person, I have to cut them down at the roots? Because I think we easily get kind of confused, particularly when we're afraid. We go, I either have to cut you down at the roots, or you're going to grow into this wild thing that grows everywhere. But of course, those aren't the only possibilities. Another possibility when something's a growing thing, particularly a child, is to say containment. Like when you're growing a fig tree, you have to contain its roots to have it to grow. So a certain amount of containment, of course, is incredibly important. The holding is important. And watering and nurturing. There are all kinds of things I can do if I want to help another human being grow into what they can be, that aren't just, let's cut life off at the roots so that you don't risk, and aren't just, well, and you're going to, I won't do anything. Like we fear that those are the only alternatives. But we could really ask ourselves, what kind of gardening is called for here? And you can be sure that if you garden by cutting all of your plants off at the roots, you will definitely have a garden that's not wild, but you will also not have a garden. That's the consequence of it.
Yeah. And it's reminding me, Justin, of we did a poem, I don't know how many weeks ago now, because I don't know when this is going to go out, but the poem where we talked about the way that everything is possible, the possibility of everything being measured by the way that it's set free, the intensity of it is measured by the way that it's set free, and that freedom to be what something is, to be what we are in this unfolding, in this moment, in this phase of our life, in this phase of our development, whether we're children or adults, to be held and yet to be seen for what's emerging, and to trust and allow that emerging and that emergence as a part of development, rather than something to be reined in because God knows what you'll turn into if I let you be like that. Really looking at ourselves as to how we define the meaning of keeping each other safe, and how maybe trying to control that and trying to be the determinant of that is this killing thing. And instead of being the gardener that we think we're kind of being a bulldozer, and we're taking everything off at the quick and forgetting that what's emerging might be really beautiful, and we just need to shape it somehow with some ways that you put it in the right spot for the light that it needs, or water it the amount that it needs watering. But otherwise you're allowing and knowing the dance between allowing and holding, as you say, and what those differences are, where they come from in ourselves. Am I coming from fear, or am I coming from creativity and responsiveness? Am I trying to hang on, or am I relating to the new and the unfolding and the growing with faith and being creative?
That's such a beautiful pair of distinctions, Lizzie. Where we're coming from. I'm keeping an eye on our time and thinking there's lots more I could say. There's probably lots more that you can say, but I think we're probably done for today. Well, I'm very excited about when this might go out.
Yes.
You know, I know it will probably go out because one or both of us, but probably you first, are otherwise engaged. So when this does hit the wider world, it will be because something big is happening in your life in all probability. But thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for listening and being with us in this what feels like is a very big conversation. It's always big, always deep themes, and I'm really grateful to be here and to be in the conversation with all of you and with you, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.